More than a place to listen, a place to be heard. That's right. 972-5481 gets her done. You call us, we chat with you. Your wisdom spreads out across the land like a new and improved version of Corona. No, don't even go. David Lance Jackson and you, thanks for being here this morning. Earlier, we had a conversation with 14th District State Representative Gina Mossbrucker.
That's right.
And now we're jumping to the other chamber. From the Washington State Senate, we have State Senator John Braun from the 20th District, which is encompasses, Centralia and areas north of Vancouver. Is that right, sir?
Yes, so we go just north of Centralia, Rochester, Tanano area, down to just northern Clark County, so just south of Woodland.
Gotcha. Welcome aboard, sir. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Definitely.
Ms. Mossbrucker was very complimentary to you and your efforts in terms of nudging the governor to try to get us going in a business-friendly direction. So kudos to you for that. One of the reason we wanted to have you on is your economic sense articles. You've been, I guess, putting those out since you got in office in 2012. Is that right?
I have. They focus on things that affect our economy and therefore our state's budget and the services we provide to citizens around the state.
We are regular readers here at Newstalk 1280 and really appreciate your train of thought, the way you put things together, how easy it is to understand. I recommend everybody get a chance to read your thoughts because it's very, very clear. What caught our eye on this last one is the need for testing, and you make such a great case for that. And yet you also, at the same time, say you don't see anything really coming from our health experts that are going to take us in that direction. Can you give us a little background on that?
Yeah, sure. So, and there's a couple different types of testing out there. There's this kind of swab-based testing that the state has been focused on, and that's really to help folks that have symptoms or have been exposed and to know whether they currently have the virus. Good stuff. I'm not trying to take away that at all, but one of the things we really don't know about this disease is how prevalent it is throughout our state, and the reason that is important is that helps us understand fundamentally whether this is a virus with a low infection rate but a high mortality rate, high fatality rate, or is very infectious and a low fatality rate, and that's really important because. And they both, the curves. Everybody wants to show you the curve of the infections. They look the same in the first few months, but the one is much more deadly in the out months. And right now, based on what we've seen around the world and around the country, it looks like a high infection rate, and therefore what you learn is you have a high infection rate, and you know the number of tragic deaths from this. You just do the math, and you can figure out the mortality rate is much lower than you thought. And the reason that is really important in Washington State and everywhere that's dealing with this is now you can focus on the truly vulnerable folks, and the rest of the folks, their risk of getting back to work or back to school is much lower than we had previously estimated. It allows us to get at least good chunks of our economy back to work, which I think is there's an obvious health issue here, but long term we have an economic issue. Whether you're an individual trying to take care of your family, or you're the state, depending on revenues to provide valuable services to folks around the state, the economic hit is going to be enormous and a very high human cost. So this simply gives us an important piece of data that allows us to make a smart decision about how to go forward. And right now we're ideally poised to do this, and we're just not moving forward on it. It's a little frustrating.
Your argument makes so much sense, and as you say in the economic sense article that, with UW sitting right there with its capability to crank those tests, if we could just get them, the test data, and you were a little, and I think very reasonably critical of our health department for not really knowing where we're at with all of that, and with the hue and cry for testing across the country, why aren't they taking the lead saying, look, we need 25,000 tests, plunk it in the lap of UW, spit it out, and we'll know if the governor wants science to drive this, then let's get him some real science. So why aren't they taking the lead on that, Senator? Why do you think that is?
I'm honestly scratching my head about it. And just to be clear, this is even better than you described. Unlike the swab test and some of the other stuff that requires testing materials and PPE, this test doesn't. The test, and UW has it today. Today, as of I think it's 5 days now, they can process 10,000 tests per day. It doesn't take a test kit, doesn't take special material. It's literally the same blood draw you do if you're going to get your cholesterol tested. It's a tourniquet, an alcohol swab, a syringe, and a blood container, and ship it to the University of Washington, and they can test it within a day and tell you where you're at. So this does not have to take away from any of the other efforts going on. We simply have to say, hey, that's good data. We could use that's good science. We could use to make decisions. And I've repeatedly gotten, oh well, that's interesting. That's nice to hear about. It's not our top issue. We're focused on swab tests and PPE, and that's not to say that those aren't important issues. This is something they could do. They're not mutually exclusive. They could go exactly the same time. It doesn't take tests. We have everything we need to do it today. We just need a little bit of attention to drive this forward. And I wanted to add one thing, if I may. I talked about the kind of the immediate data. If we test, and I've suggested 25,000 folks, give us an idea of the fatality rate with this virus. In the out months, the same research will give us information about whether the antibodies are really providing immunity, how long they last, all kinds of things that will be critical in the coming months as we potentially see another bump from this virus. So
absolutely,
it's fairly time sensitive. We have everything we need. To their credit, and the university has pressed forward on this, development the capability. They're basically using a test, an FDA approved test, high percentage accuracy, provided by Abbott Labs, and they are ready to go. We just got to find a way to get this moving.
Go ahead, Lance.
Have you presented this to the governor? What's the governor saying? I mean, is he resisting?
So it's kind of odd. I mean, it's consistent though. It's all well. That's interesting work. It might be important to us later on. It's just not the top of our list, and it continues to say that. And this is why I keep. Or they'll push back and say, well, we don't know if the antibodies really do anything, which is true. But the fatality rate is enormously important data. I mean, they just kind of play it off. Oh, that's not a panacea. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying it's a really important set of data, and stop downplaying it when all you have to do is give it a little nudge. Yeah. And we got enormous talent in the state that will do it. We just got to help them a little bit.
We are seeing those kinds of tests and data run now in Miami-Dade. Stanford ran tests, USC ran tests. Yep. There are plenty of corroborating experiments that have taken place that have generated good information there, and information that runs contradictory to a lot of the really restrictive types of policies. We want to keep people safe, but we want to keep people as safe, and we want to keep the government, the society as active wherever that line is. And you won't know that line till we have that kind of data. And then, as you say, moving forward about do the antibodies provide immunity the second time around, and for how long, we're going to need all of that. So, sir, we're with you. And I guess I don't know if every community doesn't have one of those PAML offices where you can stop by and get your blood tested. Everybody hey, people who aren't having symptoms, they want to know if they are part of the asymptomatic carriers too. And so you wouldn't have trouble getting 25,000 people wanting to get tested who aren't showing symptoms from around the state. So every PAML office ought to open up and say, come on in, we're going to send 25,000 vials to UW, and we'll let you know.
Jeez. Yeah, absolutely, and I'd add, these tests, the antibody tests, they're coming available. Not surprisingly, private sector is kind of pushing forward on this. You can go online right now and order a test. You can go through your doctor and get a test, and the people aren't going to wait. And that's great for them, frankly. The downside is if it's not, it's like a poll, right? If it's not carefully structured, so you have a truly random sample, so you're testing groups to make sure everybody's then it doesn't give us the same amount of data. The university is ideally poised. They know how to do this. They can do it well, and so we're going to take off and do it all on our own if there's no attention given to it by the governor. But if we give it a little bit of attention, we can get so much more. Sure, and instead of lagging these folks around the country and around the world that are already doing this, we can actually lead them.
Absolutely. Statistically significant sort of testing. That's what we need, and that's where the scientists and the the data manipulating people can really come into play there, the analyzers. All right, so as that plays out, we also know that the Republican plan to get back to work has been released. Do you have any thoughts on that for us, sir?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple things. One, and it's got a long list of things. I won't go through all of them. Helping businesses as they recover, but I think the most important things, and after nearly a month of pushing, we're starting to get a little bit. Is the first thing is we got to tell the public. What we hear a lot about. We're making decisions on science. We're using data, which is great. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. But we have not been able. If you're doing that, then you have an actual goal. You have a date. You have a plan
Right.
to get back. And we've heard is, well, there's measures of metrics or metrics of measures. It means nothing, and I think the folks of Washington are getting a little frustrated with that. So yesterday, the governor finally, after a month of prodding, released some additional data. It's not we haven't been through all of it, but people need to know. I mean, the bottom line is we're in a free society, and the governor said stay at home, and we have voluntarily done that. There's really no way to enforce that. We will continue that, I believe, if we know what the plan is. But we haven't really known what the plan is. We haven't really known. It's like, well, we need to flatten the curve. Okay, we flatten the curve. Well, we need to get our R naught value down below 1. Well, it is, or it appears to be. Well, so give us a specific plan, and I think people will stick with it. If we don't, people will start ignoring it, and then I think that we get the worst of all worlds.
Yeah, that's right.
And instead of coming back in a thoughtful, planned way, sooner, not later, as long as we can stay safe, and I say that twice, we got to stay safe. We got to keep people safe, and particularly the vulnerable folks. We got to keep them safe. But there's a ton of things we can do to get people back to work safely, and we ought to be doing them sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Lewis and Clark didn't have a map, but they knew they were supposed to go west. At least they knew what the direction was, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
Come on.
That's right.
We
are not going to be able to drive risk to zero. We can drive it pretty low if we're thoughtful about it. And we know, we've had grocery workers at the job, throughout this thing, in taking some safety measures, and the data shows, again, using data, shows that extraordinarily low infection rates. So we know we can do this in a very challenging area. Why can't we do it in other areas and get people back on the job, taking care of their families?
Absolutely. We're seeing some lawsuits now being threatened and some filed against the governor for overreach. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Was it going to go anywhere?
Well, I think it depends. His emergency powers clearly give him some ability to do the stay-at-home order. As I said, I don't think there's any realistic way he can enforce that, but I think he has legal authority. The restrictions on religious activities, I think he's got it flat out wrong. I think the case law and the Constitution are clear that he is very likely to lose those, and there is no reason for him to take the stand where he did, and it's going to force folks into the courts.
Well, we'll keep our eye on that. We got about a minute to go. Anything you want to add to all the folks in this part of the state listening to what you're working on?
Well, I would encourage folks to just keep the faith, keep looking for ways to get back to your lives. Recognize it's not going to be like it was before, but we can, the strength of our state and our nation is our ability, our ability to respond to new situations. I think if we can get the state government to set us free to do that in a safe way. Give us guidelines. This is what we got to do to stay safe. But let folks figure out their situation at where they're at, and they will amaze us with their ingenuity and their ability to respond to that. That's and we just got to keep pushing the governor and his staff to let us go.
Senator John Braun, thank you, sir, for your time this morning.
You.
Keep on pushing on behalf of Washingtonians everywhere. And if the situation arises, we'd like to talk to you again down the road. Thank you, sir.